so cynical. Bah humbug, Gene.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Fucking burning barrels in the streets, New York. I'd be terrified to go to New York. Everyone's going to murder you just for getting on a train.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Merry Christmas and welcome back to Shat The Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, this is the podcast for you. I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me are my co-hosts, Ash, Cotton-Headed Ninny Mungins, Hobbs.
Hi, y'all.
And Big D, Dick Ebert.
Ho, ho, ho.
Each week, we take a look back in time, decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you'd like to see all the movies we have covered, will cover, want to choose one for yourself, please visit shatpod.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we'll provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie takes to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. It's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV. We review TV series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, Lovecraft Country, and Watchmen. Find all that information and past episodes at shatpod.com/TV. And finally, to hang out with us live, follow and subscribe to our Twitch channel, shatpod.com/Twitch, and our YouTube channel where we play video games, host watch parties, and edit this podcast live. All that being said, Big D, what movie are we reviewing today?
Gene, usually this is the part in the podcast where we discuss our wonderful listener who has commissioned a film. Today is not one of those. Today is one of the Shat holiday spectaculars that we like to do each year. And each year we are an 80s and 90s podcast. So there's a finite number of holiday movies we can pick from. And it is getting harder and harder each year. We've done Nightmare Before Christmas, Christmas Vacation, Christmas Story, Jingle All the Way, Santa Claus, Scrooged, and then quasi-Christmas movies like Die Hard. We did Trading Places. Now Rambo is potentially a Christmas movie because someone's pointed out that there's Christmas decorations in it. But for this podcast, we've decided instead of going to a movie that is like, say, a quasi-holiday film or something that isn't well loved, let's go into the 2000s. And if you go into the 2000s, there is one holiday film you must do, and it is the 2003 comedy classic, Elf.
Well, Elf is a Christmas comedy directed by Jon Favreau and written by David Berenbaum, starring Will Farrell as Buddy, a human raised by Santa's elves who learns about his origins and heads to New York City to meet his biological father. James Caan, Zooey Deschanel, Mary Steenburgen, Edward Asner, and Bob Newhart appear in supporting roles. Elf was released in the United States on November 7th, 2003, and became a major critical and commercial success, grossing $220 million worldwide against a $33 million budget. And who knows how much of that came from Elf inflatables. The film inspired the 2010 Broadway musical Elf the Musical and NBC's 2014 stop-motion animated television special, Elf, Buddy's Musical Christmas. So Ash, Big D, I know we all have memories of this movie. Big D, we'll start with you. What do you remember about Elf?
So I've never been a big fan of Christmas movies. The only one I remember seeing as a kid, I went to the theater and saw A Christmas Story when it came out. So other than that, yes, I'm old. That was 83. So I'm not a big fan of Christmas movies. My brother-in-law, Frank, who I have discussed on the podcast before, he decorates his house top to bottom. And he has an entire section of A Christmas Story items. He's got the lamp. He's got the miniature Chinese restaurant. He's got the house. He's got, it's countless. He's got bobbleheads of the entire family. And he watches 7 or 8 hours of the TBS 24-hour marathon. Usually Brazilians do Christmas the night before. So they celebrate the 24th. So we will go over there. And to his wife's chagrin, he will have it in the background nonstop. And she wants to kill him. I've never been a big fan. And a lot of the movies that we've done are the first time I ever saw him. Jingle All the Way for the podcast. Nightmare Before Christmas, podcast. Scrooged I had seen, but mainly for the podcast. And Elf has always felt different to me because it feels like it is a modern version of the classic films. It wasn't cynical. It wasn't preachy about consumerism and about this isn't what Christmas is about. And I think that's why Elf is one of the few films that each year I try to rewatch. And this year was the second year with Emma, and her laughter at this movie sold me.
I am a big fan of Christmas movies, but I don't own any except for Elf. And honestly, Sarah owns it, but it is a must watch every year. But prior to that, one of my groomsmen, Jay Mill, who you met at the wedding, Big D, he was my roommate in California from 2004 to 2006. So this movie was fresh at the time. He is obsessed with Will Farrell and this movie. I think Jay Mill is to Elf as Frank is to A Christmas Story. So it was only a matter of time before he got me to watch it. Prior to that, I hadn't seen it. And as my love of Christmas has grown from not celebrating it at all as a kid to begging for the tree to go up in like November as an adult, so has my love of Elf really developed from thinking it's just an okay movie, which I honestly, 2004, 2005-ish, I thought it was just okay. Now I really appreciate it, as you do, Big D, as a holiday classic.
Yeah, there's a rare film that I'm able to watch with both of my children that we're reviewing. Like a lot of these I'll watch with Finn because he's older, but Ellie, I don't know if I've ever watched a movie we've done for the pod with Ellie. And this was one that finally I could because both of my kids are obsessed with this film. Every year it's the first Christmas movie we watch. Our elf, like we have those damnable elves on the shelf. One of ours is named Buddy because of this movie. And I don't know when this became a Christmas classic, like in our household, because it used to be 2 films that we watched every year, but now this one kind of is in there as well. And there's 3 things we watch every year. I think it's adorable. I think it's perfect for Shat on Christmas. And it was like a whole family Shat affair, which was nice.
So 2 questions stemming from that. One, I just need a spot check on all the children's ages now because we've been doing this for so long that I'm stuck in a time warp where all your children are the same age they were when we started this thing. So how old is each child now?
Yeah, so Finn will be 8 in a month and Ellie is 5.5. But what's crazy is when I started this podcast, she wasn't even talking yet.
Right. Well, we're her godparents, so.
Yes, we were in the birthing room.
Yes.
You were.
We were. So Emma just turned 8 also.
So we've got an 8, a 7, and a 5 right now?
Yeah.
Or an 8, a soon to be 8, and a soon to be 6-ish.
Yep.
Well, yeah,
Okay, cool.
It's just 8, 7, 5. It works.
As I make my cynical comments about your children, I want to be sure that I'm being accurate on the age. And then 2 is, part of this movie, did anyone give a shit about elves at all?
No.
Right? It was Santa, reindeer, even Mrs. Claus to a degree. No one gave a shit about elves prior to this movie. I think that gives it a special standing.
Yeah, I don't think elves got respect. They were like sidekick caricatures. This one, they build in some of their values.
Yeah, before all the Tolkienites start writing in, we're not talking about Middle-earth. Those elves have always been well respected, as have the elves from Wizards of the Coast. Like we're not talking about that. No, but Christmas elves.
Yeah, but don't even forget they mentioned that in here. How they tried to work with the trolls. Which one drank? You saw some drink.
No, gnomes drink.
The gnomes drank.
Trolls can't be potty trained.
Which tracks. I feel like that tracks.
All right, let's hit the trailer.
Hi.
Your costume is pretty.
Oh, it's not a costume. I'm an elf.
Oh.
Well, technically I'm a human, but I was raised by elves.
New Line Cinema presents the story of one elf who's coming home for Christmas.
Boy, can't wait to see my dad. We're going to go ice skating and eat sugar plums. Sorry.
Now,
I think someone sent you a Christmas gram.
Dad!
We should call security.
Good idea.
I like to whisper too.
Buddy's experiencing a world he never knew existed.
Buddy's your son. What am I going to do? He's certifiably insane.
Discovering what it takes to fit in. And going where no elf has gone before.
What he needs is to be nurtured. Bring him home. Introduce him to Emily and Michael.
How long do you think you'll be with us?
I was thinking like forever.
He cannot stay here.
We can't just throw him out in the snow.
He loves the snow. He's told me 15 times.
Ow! Son of a nutcracker!
We can take him.
Where did you say you were from?
This holiday season,
I think you're beautiful and my tongue swells up when I am around you.
get ready
I planned out our whole day. I thought maybe we could make gingerbread houses and maybe even hold hands.
for a tall tale
How are we going to get the star on top?
of elfish proportions.
I got it.
Will Farrell.
Okay, people, Santa's coming to town.
Ah! Oh my God! I know him.
Elf.
Do you remember me? I didn't recognize you.
I know, I'm in work clothes. I didn't know you had elves here.
You're hilarious, my friend.
Did you have to borrow a reindeer to get down here?
Hey, you feeling strong, my friend? Call me Elf one more time.
On Christmas Eve, an orphaned baby crawls into Santa's sack and is unwittingly taken to the North Pole. The elves name him Buddy and raise him as one of their own. But upon reaching childhood, Buddy learns that he is a human. Papa Elf tells Buddy that his biological father, Walter, works for a book publisher at the Empire State Building. Santa reveals that Walter is on the naughty list due to his selfishness and suggests Buddy could help redeem Walter with some Christmas spirit.
So this film is directed by Jon Favreau, and he's of Swinger fame. At this point in his career, he had only directed one other film. It's even before Swingers. So he was a nobody in the industry. Today, you think of him as the director of Iron Man. He started the whole MCU. He now does The Mandalorian. He has a huge hand in Disney's Star Wars. So he's a big deal now. But this was before he was established. He was a nobody. And his goal in creating this, he wanted to create a timeless classic. And when it opens in the North Pole, it feels so authentic to a kid of the 80s. It's timeless. They were dedicated to creating this practically. Even though New Line Cinema did not trust the film, did not want to give them the budget, they could have done this. This is a CGI. They could have easily done this. He took it as a I have to be honest and I have to respect the original source. They did rudimentary like cartoon animation. They got in stop motion characters to feel like those 60s and 70s cartoons and specials. And it's amazing. When you see Buddy in any of those elf scenes, there's a total of 47. You think, okay, that's some kind of CGI or they did some kind of trick with the lenses. That is a practical effect. It's called forced perspective. So they would take Buddy and put him up in the front of the classroom, then sit the other kids about 8-10 feet behind in the chairs. And if you shot at a specific angle, it would work. Today, they do this with like tracking cameras and they have markers in the floor. So it's all computer done. There was no way to do that. They had two crews running. One would come in at night, set up the shot. They would bang it out. And those honest, old school Hollywood tricks give this movie like a real, like warm, lived in feel.
And anybody who's listened to this podcast for a while knows that one of our biggest pet peeves is when the tone doesn't match up, whether it's The Quick and the Dead or any other movie that can't get its visuals in line with the fact that it's a comedy. Like it might be a very, very drab background, but then you got a comedy, or maybe they're trying to mix drama and romance in a way that doesn't work with the period. This movie gets it right. What you just described, Big D, it sets the tone for the whole movie. And let's use a comparison here. The Santa Claus, right? I'm not knocking the Santa Claus. I actually enjoyed that one too, because I like pretty much all Christmas movies. But movies like that, when they came out, tried to wow us with the effects. They're like, this is the coolest new thing we could do with the computers. Check it out. Like, he's fat. They're flying, right? And they don't feel as timeless. Like the Santa Claus feels very much in its time and aging poorly, right? Because of how badly those effects have aged. I don't know if you guys remember the effective liberating flight squad from the Santa Claus, like the elves that fly everywhere. They're like a SWAT unit of elves. They were sure, look, we're flipping. Wow, we're flying. And you look back on it now and it looks terrible because they didn't go with this classic effect, which again fits the tone of the entire film and the style of comedy they're going to use.
Yeah, at the end, they have to do CGI when they do Santa's flight out of the park. It doesn't look great, but they've earned my pass from the rest of the movie. If you start off with some special effect of the camera flying into the North Pole, that bullshit, I'm going to already have a bad taste in my mouth. And today I'm thinking, 83, I saw Christmas Story in the theaters, but before that, the 80s were kind of like a desert for holiday films. There were no movies that came out. You think back, the movies I watched as a kid were made in like the 40s or the 60s. You know, you had Charlie Brown Christmas was in 65. It's a Wonderful Life was 46. Miracle on 34th Street was 47. A Christmas Carol was 38. And then all those Rankin Bass stop motion classics like Rudolph, Santa Claus is coming to town, Frosty. Those were the late 60s into the early 70s. That's the shit that Jon Favreau and we grew up in childhood, that Rankin Bass, it influenced Elf to the point where when he came and pitched the movie, he put the Rankin Bass book down on the table. And that was great until later on in production when the lawyers got involved and they said, where does inspiration and blatant just copyright infringement? They went and got Buddy a blue suit. Half the scenes were shot in blue Buddy suit because they were worried they were going to be sued. Everything from Leon, the snowman, everything is a direct copy. In the end, they didn't have an issue, but it feels so great. So 80s, me growing up watching this stuff.
Yeah, I think that, something happens here to your point about the practical effects where you've got, a very clear vision for what type of Christmas movie this is supposed to be. Because in the 90s, like there were all of these different, phases of Christmas and the inspirational Christmas and the you still need to believe Christmas and the we're all supposed to be a family Christmas. And this is supposed to be, like you're saying, very much like that classic claymation. And Buddy in a lot of ways moves and acts like he's made of claymation as well, right? Like all of that I think is so intentional, but I have trouble connecting to a lot of that and a lot of the films you're talking about because I'm like you, Gene, like I love most Christmas movies, but only the Christmas movies like I've seen. There's a lot of like really quote unquote classic movies that I guess just being born when I was born, I should have seen them, but never did. Like I've never seen It's a Wonderful Life. I've never seen A Christmas Story. I've never seen the original Miracle on 34th. I've seen the one with like Dylan McDermott or whatever his name is, and the little girl that was so cute from Matilda. I've seen that one, but I don't know. The recent ones I know, but like the quote unquote classics, completely lost on.
If I have any advice for any person who hasn't seen A Christmas Story, it's don't watch A Christmas Story. It is an absolute dog water film. But Miracle on 34th Street, which I've watched in the past couple weeks even, it's pretty fantastic. It's a Wonderful Life is terrifically dark. I think people don't give that movie enough credit for how dark it is. It features like themes of suicide and being dispossessed. And then there's Holiday Inn and White Christmas. Now those I absolutely love because it's basically the same fucking movie. Like I get mixed up even now between the two. You just get to pick, do you want more singing or more dancing? Like it's essentially the same setup.
But I mean, I don't blame you guys for not watching them. You had options. What year were you born?
80.
83.
Okay, so if you think about it, in your childhood, all the good ones started to come out. You had The Grinch Who Stole Christmas came out. You had A Christmas Story, The Polar Express, Elf, Home Alone. You're not going to go back and watch the black and white shit when you had modern stuff. And now every year something new comes out. Now it's an industry.
And again, people are going to argue that, but listen, and maybe this is just like the booze hound in me talking, but when I want to sit in a like snowy cabin and get absolutely trashed on like imperial stouts or Belgian quads, or just fucking red wine if that's all we've got, I don't want to watch any of those 80s ones. You need to go back to the fucking like crackly audio, Technicolor, big smiles all the time, singing and dancing, Bing Crosby. Like that's the shit you want to watch. But I will also make an exception for Elf.
Well, yeah, I mean, Meet Me in St. Louis and, Little Women. Those are like the classic Christmas movies I'll watch. But I don't know. I argue, Big D, yeah, new shit comes out every year, but it's that Hallmark shit. Like, it's not like actual good movies that come out anymore. What was that? The tragedy of Will Farrell and Ryan Reynolds last year. That horrible dumpster fire of a film.
Spirited?
Yeah, Spirited.
So bad.
I did not see it.
Terrible. So
I got through about 7 minutes.
Ugh. I watched the whole thing, and let me tell you, terrible.
The Kurt Russell one a couple years ago was okay.
No.
Wasn't great, but it was tolerable.
No. And the new one, the Eddie Murphy one, the Candy Cane Lane, just don't watch it, guys. Don't watch it.
When Buddy finds his father at work, Walter has him thrown out. Security guards sarcastically tell Buddy to go to a local Gimbel's department store where he falls for Jovi, an unenthusiastic employee. Buddy redecorates for an upcoming visit from Santa, but causes a brawl when he discovers that the Gimbel Santa is not the real deal. Walter bails Buddy out of the police station, and a DNA test confirms that Buddy is his biological son. Buddy's strange behavior annoys Walter and Buddy's stepmother, Michael, but his stepmother, Emily, insists that they take care of him.
So obviously we've talked about the fact that Elf is a great Christmas movie, talked about some of the good ones, but also talked about how like most of the time these movies come out in the holiday season and they're just terrible. Like there's nothing good about them. And I think that's because making a Christmas movie that is something that, you know, has any sort of worth is actually a really difficult thing to do as a director, as a acting team, all of that. And there's something that's happening in this part of the movie that I think kind of unlocks what makes a good Christmas movie, because Elf like instantly makes you feel strangely nostalgic and like warm and cheerful and like all the things like the holidays, regardless of which one you celebrate, what they're supposed to make you feel. But like, how does it do that? And so I spent a lot of time thinking about it and talking to my kids about why they like this. And I think that what happens is a Christmas film has to both appeal to kids, but not alienate an adult audience. Like the adults still have to like it, like a good Pixar film, right? But it also has to give the adults something to latch onto that make them feel like kids again as well, while not alienating their own children. So it can't be like too sarcastic or highbrow. It has to be somewhere in between. And Elf does that. The color palette all throughout looks just like what a Christmas movie should look like. The world of claymation, like we talked about that, it comes to life. I mean, the color green of Buddy's suit, like that alone, the way that everyone around him moves, the way that his voice sounds. And most importantly, like this movie focuses on what I think to be the most effective of all Christmas themes, which is like making you feel like you should still believe, and not just believe in Santa, but like believe in family and believe in the ones that you love and the fact that you're all supposed to be together at least once a year, like at this time. And you've got him from being an orphan to the first scene where he seeks out his real dad in New York. And at least for me, like I can't stand the thought of somebody being alone at the holidays. Like it makes me immensely sad that people who don't have anybody this time of year. And I think that's kind of a pretty universal feeling for people, that they don't have anybody to celebrate with. And we feel that for Buddy. We're like instantly brought in, and it's very sneaky the way they do it, because even as adults, we start rooting for what is effectively like a huge weirdo because of the way they kind of set all of that up, like from the very beginning.
So I've become a fan of this movie, but I've never watched it around a child. So I'm glad to hear that your kids like this movie as well. I don't know that I would as a child. Like, I don't know if I would really get all of it, because the specific comedy that Will Farrell uses, it's not as simple as people think, right? It takes me back to when if you've ever seen his audition tape for Saturday Night Live, he's a cat playing with like a ball of paper.
Yes.
And it's absolutely hilarious, but I don't know if like a kid gets it, even though it's simple enough for a kid to get, because he's not cynical. He's certainly not a cynical comic, but he doesn't do silly in a fully slapstick way with complete abandon. Like he's not trying to, it's almost like he's not trying to get you to laugh. He's just very satisfied that he's amusing himself. And I was watching him as Buddy, and it's like, he's being an elf that is acting the way a child or an elf would act, but still with the mind of a 43-year-old man. It's a very, very interesting, complex, sophisticated performance that he's giving, which lets him do things that kids apparently enjoy, but also in a way that adults will laugh. And I don't have the words to express like how excellent he is at doing this and how nobody else could.
Well, I think that's it. You just hit on it. They see themselves in Buddy. Buddy's childlike innocence, the way he approaches everything, is the way a kid would. He's excited by the things kids are excited by. He's excited by the mail room, the suction devices. He's excited by syrup on spaghetti. He's excited by the simple things, cutting out and doing decorations, and it's wonderful, and spinning doors and cutting up like paper snowflakes. That's the shit they would like. And then also Emma enjoyed the weird situations where he was put in the adult world and the awkwardness, like the gift he gave his father. And Emma goes, that's embarrassing. Why would you give your father a bathing suit? You know, so like you see those interactions where kids are trying to feel, how would I respond in the real world? And that fish out of water trip into New York, it works because of Will Farrell. He embodies that childhood innocence, even physically, the way he moves. When he runs and he like drags his arms behind him and he flaps them, he runs like a kid. He never comes close to breaking character or even winking at the audience. He is earnest. And to be fair, this is his thing. If you go to a lot of his movies, it is that deadpan delivery. It is that Step Brothers where he never breaks. He is not always the brightest character, or Talladega Nights, but he pulls it off. And I think he is the only actor who could pull up the, hey, little buddy, come here, hugging the raccoon. Picture Jim Carrey doing that shit, or running around in the door, or pushing all the elevator buttons. This movie originally, they wanted Chris Farley. How would this movie be with Chris Farley? You know, the first joke would be the tiny green suit. It would be fat elf in a little. This movie would be nothing and forgotten. This would be Tommy Boy at Christmas.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think that, Gene, to your kids love it, right? Maybe you wouldn't have. I think it's because Buddy does all the things that like kids want to do. Like even the gross stuff. Like my son, I think if he were not prevented, would eat gum off of like a railing in public, because
even if you told him, don't do it.
He would want to put it in his mouth, or like jumping on the Christmas tree. Like he would love to launch himself to try to put the stuff on top of the Christmas tree.
Big D, you asked about Jim Carrey in this role. I think I would also enjoy that movie. It would just be a very different movie. He'd be a lot scarier, as Buddy the Elf, but still, it would still, I think the story would work. But coming around to my point on that is I do agree that he's approaching this like a child. But again, it's this additional question of what if you were a grown man who had just never been elevated beyond anything but being a child or an elf, right? It's slightly different. They didn't say be a kid. They said be a man who is still a kid. And that comes across in that brawl scene at Gimbel's. And I will never not laugh at this scene. It is one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Everything about it is genius. First of all, again, talking about that adult level comedy, they bring in Artie Lang as Santa, and he calls Buddy Zippy. And then Buddy, again, like you said, that deadpan delivery, he's leaning in quietly, accusing Santa of smelling like beef and cheese and sitting on a throne of lies. And the delivery is so quiet. And then the kid in Santa's lap is like, lies. And soon you got Santa, he's smashing Lego skyscrapers with a pipe. And at that point, I've like hit hard giggles, but I haven't burst out in laughter yet. And then Will Farrell does this thing. And I encourage everyone who hasn't seen this movie in a while, go back, watch. If you've watched nothing else, just watch this scene. He's like half sitting his ass in the merchandise shelf because he's afraid of the violence that's going on. 6'3", 43-year-old man in an elf suit. He's still frantically pointing at a tackled Santa because the most important thing he has to express to everybody is he's not real. That's what you need to know. Not that I was just attacked, but that he's not real.
Yeah, and we have to talk about some of the other cast. Faison Love, who plays the manager, he's great because he's reacting the way we would. If you saw this adult man doing this, you're like, what fucking crazy shit is this? But he's like, hey, kids, tomorrow, Santa! He's fucking melting down. It's so good. They play off each other. And if you notice, obviously, anybody out there who's watched the movies that make us will know I've watched it because I watched it again. Faison Love's character, his name tag says Wanda because they had originally cast Wanda Sykes as that role. And they said, it'll be funny. Let's just have Faison Love like wearing the Wanda thing. This entire section works.
I feel like we're getting a monthly feature on Shat the Movies where we're thankful that Wanda Sykes wasn't in a movie. I'm gonna put this one on the board as well. Just tack it right up there.
Yeah, I mean, I have nothing to add other than my very favorite part of this movie is the same, right? It's these scenes in Gimbel's, and it's not just this scene where they interact. It's also the whole thing with Faison Love thinking that he's from corporate and that somebody's trying to come and like take over, and they're thinking they're not doing a great job and it looks too good. Like the decorations are too nice. And he's panicked that they're all going to get fired. But this brings you to the part where this is so epically quotable, right? Is that I can't tell you the amount of times during Christmas that myself or my kids are like, Santa, I know him. Like we quote all of the scenes from this part. And it's this perfect balance between like crazy and like a really realistic way people would interact with someone like Buddy. The only thing I can equate it to, and I don't mean to offend any of our listeners who are these people, but like Disney adults, I get it. You have a right to be whatever you want to be and a right to be into something that hardcore. Like I'm definitely a fangirl for certain things like D&D, Doctor Who, things like that. But Disney adults take it to a whole other level where their entire love for Disney becomes not just like a love, but like their identity, their home furnishings, their kitchen gear, like their mixer looks like Mickey Mouse. And I think Buddy clearly feels that for Christmas. So it tracks for me that people would look at someone like this and just kind of like roll their eyes and go, oh, okay, so like you're one of those Christmas people.
But Ash, you're right that the Disney adults are different from other fan bases because they give you like a very something is not right feeling in your stomach that like a Doctor Who fan or a Dungeons and Dragons fan wouldn't give you. I was shocked during my honeymoon to discover that the number one tourist attraction in France is Disneyland Paris, or some know it as Euro Disney, right? And that's not even close. Like the Louvre gets 8 million visitors a year. Disneyland Paris gets 15 million. That's nearly double, right? And remember, like children don't have independent purchasing power. It's not like Emma could go and say, "Hey, Dad, I'll see you later. I'm going to go for a week and go to Disneyland Paris." I know personally 2 adults who flew all the way to France. This is across the Atlantic Ocean solely to spend the week at Disneyland Paris and did not go anywhere else in Europe.
That is insane.
Wow.
Although it is cheaper to go to Disneyland Paris now than Disney World because of how fucking expensive it's become.
Well, I think if the Louvre added a Ratatouille ride, they could siphon off some of those visitors. Hey, on the Ratatouille ride, you go in front of the Mona Lisa. I think that's the hit.
Well, hey, there it is. 2 for 1.
2 birds, 1 rat, yeah. Michael and Buddy become friends when they defeat a gang of bullies in a snowball fight, and Jovi falls in love with Buddy after they go on a date. Meanwhile, Walter's boss, Fulton Greenway, expects Walter to have a new book ready by Christmas Eve. When Walter and his team secure a meeting with best-selling children's author Miles Finch, Buddy mistakes Finch for an elf. When Finch angrily leaves the meeting, Walter harshly disowns Buddy. Heartbroken, Buddy writes an apology note and leaves Walter's apartment.
So watching this, I started thinking about another New York movie because this is filmed in New York, a majority of it that they're not in the North Pole. And I was thinking like the Ghostbusters. No, it's okay. I just want to lay that out there.
Facts.
So, it's facts. That's what we're here for. So in Ghostbusters, every time you would see like the crowd, it felt very staged. It felt people singing the Ghostbusters theme. It didn't seem real. This was filmed in New York in the Christmas season of like 2002. They filmed only 14 days. And they did guerrilla tactics that I think affected the way the final movie looks real. It looks authentic, just like the North Pole. That whole Lincoln Tunnel thing, that was Will Farrell and a cameraman in the Lincoln Tunnel. They didn't have a permit. Him running through the intersections, him going up to people. You know the guy in the red suit that he goes, Santa, Santa. That wasn't an extra. That was a dude walking down the street to go get a cup of coffee. It all feels real. And this is a different depiction of the normal, stereotypical New York we get. Even Home Alone 2. It's cynical. New York is dirty. There's homeless, graffiti. There's tons of people and crime. People are always rude. You got the typical New York cab driver and Scrooged. In this, New York is a utopia. Nobody's rude. Everybody's wonderful. It's a kinder, gentler. The New York tropes are nowhere to be found. Everybody's patient. Let's look at the fact that we have Walter and Emily, both fully functioning adults. They embrace taking in this mentally challenged adult. He looks like he's mentally ill. And they're not only just excited, but Emily's just over the moon. This is great. Let's do it. His dad is not an overachieving workaholic like every other tropey Christmas movie. So it was nice to have a positive impression of New York and the family without the cynicism of the traditional Christmas movie.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree on the workaholic thing. Like, I think he's definitely a workaholic because that's kind of like the whole plot line that like he's not been around as much, as is why his son, like, you know, super angsty. But other than that, I mean, I think beyond just like New York itself, it was very refreshing that like clearly Walter has money. right? But his house feels normal and it feels like lived in. I feel like if this was made by another director, he would be in some like really fancy apartment or something that would look like very New York with floor to ceiling windows, like looking out on a park view. And this doesn't have that. Like it feels like they're a normal family. And we went to New York this summer for my brother's wedding. He and his husband got married. They did like a courthouse thing. And so a bunch of us went up there, and it was Finn's first trip to New York. He'd never been before. And when we rewatched this for the pod, he looked at me and asked when it was filmed, because he said it was a lot cleaner than we went. Like even he picked up on that. Like he's like, this looks like a very different city. And even the gum he's eating off the subway fence, like even that looks pristine. Like it's a very sanitized New York.
Yeah, I think what Big D was saying on the workaholic thing is that if you think about movies like Miracle on 34th Street, right?
Yeah.
Everybody is against Santa until they're not, right? Like the kid sees it. The kid's always like, no, it's really Santa Claus. He's amazing. And then he'll usually have one ally, right, on his side. But then there's always that hard person in Miracle on 34th Street. It's the mom, right? And she's cynical. And then right at the last second, you get that turn. Same with Scrooge or anything else. And I think it goes back to that Christmas Carol formula, where here Walter changes his heart pretty quickly. He's a pretty warm guy for being a person who would be willing to take books away from nuns. But this entire New York, though, proves my theory that New York City peaked in 2005. Now, people will always accuse you of thinking that the world was at its best when you were in your mid-20s. But listen, the facts stand where they are. Brooklyn in 2005, safe, but not entirely gentrified, right? You could still go out and drink pretty cheap. Queens, pretty affordable. You could get an apartment there and not have to like kill yourself to make ends meet. Manhattan was loaded with live music and underground parties. This was the time to be in New York. And so I'll give it to them, right? In New York, I mean, you make it now, you make the movie now, and there's just nothing to do. You can go to Home Depot or Target, I guess, and that's going to be your afternoon, buddy.
So cynical. Bah humbug, Gene.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. fucking burning barrels in the streets, New York. I'd be terrified to go to New York. Everyone's going to murder you just for getting on a train.
I also think it's a pretty utopian thing to think you can find a Target in New York that isn't like a 45-minute like subway ride to get there too.
Ash, have I got news for you? There's a Target on 34th Street. In Manhattan.
Yeah, no, in the new version, that's where Buddy would get a job. Buddy would be running around in the red, like Target version of the Buddy the Elf thing.
Sorry, Gimbals was too indie.
Yeah.
Target. Sponsored by Target.
Also, one of the worst CGI moments of the film when clearly it's Macy's and they just put like gimbals over it, right? Like, and for some reason they chose a CGI like Nutcracker as well. It was a choice. But Big D, I don't know if you've gone through this with Emma, but like Finn has entered these phases where like he just like doesn't want to brush his teeth. He thinks that it's horrible. It's like a fight to get him to do it. You know, we've had to do the whole threatening that like they're going to drill in your mouth. We watched a YouTube video about how awful root canals are. Like done all these things to try to get him to like have better dental hygiene. And so this is what he picked up on this year. And, you know, from the syrup spaghetti, which is disgusting, to brownies. So, you know, like he cracks those, you know, those early 2000s, they look like those diet brownies, like what they're called Snackwells. Then it looks like he's breaking those all up on the spaghetti. And, you know, unless like elves have like tremendous dental plans, like there's no way that Buddy comes to New York with his own teeth anymore, according to my 7-year-old. And he also mentioned that he might be diabetic, which was pretty fair.
I'm glad you're giving your kid all these complexes when it comes to health. Well, I'm really afraid of when you start teaching about like economics or raw materials, because it could be like, wait a minute, where does the North Pole get its funding? How do they not suffer from massive deflation? Where does Santa's workshop get its raw materials?
Because they're not capitalist, Gene. That's how.
That's why he wears red.
Mommy, do the elves unionize? Does Santa treat them in accordance with OSHA rules? Mommy, that does not seem like I'm worried about obesity.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way with that expected Etch-a-Sketch output that they're following any sort of OSHA protocol. No, I mean, this is like, this makes Amazon look like a utopia to work in.
Did you see who the head elf is?
Bob Newhart?
No, the head elf. The elf that comments, hey, Buddy's killing me. He's causing our production to drop. Can you pick up the slack? That's Ralphie from A Christmas Story.
Oh, that would
explain why he doesn't know how to act.
Yeah, he does. Oh, no. But think about this. What would happen now? Let's say the North Pole is real, Santa's real, Buddy comes to New York. how long could Buddy survive in the real world before he became jaded and just a cynical elf?
Yeah, he's gonna turn into Andy Dick within like a month. It's actually Andy Dick's origin story. He was an elf, came to New York City, discovered cocaine.
I dare say, you remember in Philadelphia, we did the story about the robot that somebody put out that was going to try to go cross country. The hitchhiking bot. He didn't make it out of Philly before somebody killed him. Buddy might end up dead.
Sarah's mom was visiting us in Tempe, and Arizona State University, they have these little robots. I don't know if they have them all over the place.
Yeah, the delivery robots.
Yeah, little delivery robots. It's got a little flag. It's got a little light. They're adorable. They look like something out of like Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
And they're rolling along, and she asks us, we're sitting at an intersection, one of them goes by, and she goes, "Why don't people kick those over?" And we said, "What?" And she says, "Why don't people just kick those over? Why would they do that?" I don't know. Why not? Because why? Why would anybody do that to a robot? It's just doing its little job. It's just taking its little, beers and snacks to people with this little flag and its little light, just looking cute.
God, I guess you could get the food that way.
So I think the secret is this is people from the Midwest. It's everything from Philly, which I guess technically is the East, through Michigan, and I would say definitely all of Ohio. They just want to fuck shit up.
Yeah.
Yeah, even a happy little robot challenges their beliefs in the world.
Exactly.
Why is it smiling at me? Why does it have big googly eyes?
Ma'am, it doesn't have a face.
Well, I think, if we go back to, the humans that are interacting with him that are fairly cynical, we do get Jovi here, which I still question the choice of the name. Like I've never heard that name before or since. But we had a huge discussion a few weeks ago about the Manic Pixie Dream Girl. And there's never a more consummate example of that, I feel, than Zooey Deschanel. Like, I mean, guys, she was like legit married to Ben Gibbard. He actually wrote Transatlanticism about her, right? Like she is like the Manic Pixie Dream Girl of this entire time period. And I'm always pleasantly surprised when she doesn't play to that stereotype. And she doesn't here. Jovi is a normal girl. She's got money problems. She's got a shitty job. And Buddy comes in and makes her feel good. Like he treats her in a way that helps her see like how she could be treated. And I kind of get why she falls for him. My only complaint with her is how much she sings. And the fact that she closes her eyes when she sings in this really weird, earnest way that drives me nuts. Like no one sings that slow to themselves in that very like lounge singer voice in the shower. But otherwise, I think she's pretty great in this.
Ash, every time I watch this movie, I think, what if she doesn't sing this time? What if they just, Christmas Miracle, she doesn't sing this time. It is so telegraphed from early on, just like you said. And that tone she uses, it's such an overblown thing in the early 2000s. Every new artist that came out during that time was doing that tone. And as I'm watching this, I'm just thinking like Judy Garland is rolling in her grave about the way Zooey Deschanel approaches Christmas music and music in general. Yeah. If there is a flaw in this movie, it is her.
I think that's probably why I love this, I think, more than you guys. I don't know her from anything else.
You don't know her from her inspiration of Transatlanticism?
Like I'm looking up here, New Girls, never watched it. 500 Days of Summer, watched it once. So I've never been, exposed to the over bubbly singing.
Well, like that over bubbly singing isn't what bothers me. It's this like bluesy, like soulful thing she's trying to do. Like at the end when she sings Old Lang Syne and like she's so earnest sitting next to him, like it would be hella awkward if someone sang like that at your intimate Christmas gathering.
Do you remember, Big D, you might know, I don't know if you remember that she did that iPhone commercial. I think it was like the iPhone 4 or something like that. It's when they first had like the iPhone Siri could tell you what the weather was.
Uh-huh.
I almost like threw my phone at the fucking TV because Zooey Deschanel, she's standing in her house by a fucking window and she's like, Siri, what's the weather like outside? Bitch, look out the window.
Oh, I liked her. I like the way she sings.
All right.
It's old timesy.
Have I got the albums for you? Well, upon finding Finch's notebook full of ideas, Walter and his team scramble to create a book to pitch. Michael arrives and informs Walter of Buddy's departure. Realizing his mistake, Walter quits his job and walks out with Michael to find Buddy. Meanwhile, Buddy sees Santa's sleigh crash in Central Park, attracting a large crowd. Santa explains that the sleigh's engine is lost and the sleigh cannot fly without the engine due to a shortage of Christmas spirit. So we've talked about all the big names in this movie. And when people think of Elf, their minds immediately go to Will Farrell or Zooey Deschanel. But I have a really soft spot for James Caan and especially Bob Newhart. These are the older guys in the movie that really make it come together. Now, I don't know about you guys. I grew up watching the Bob Newhart show. It was, I feel like it was every night in our home. It was like dinner, Bob Newhart show. And I watched movies like Alien Nation and, of course, The Godfather, Dick Tracy, Bottle Rocket. Reuniting with Bob Newhart's old dad energy as Papa Elf, and then seeing this softer side, as you mentioned, Big Day, to James Caan, it really felt like Christmas to me. It mixed what you mentioned, Ash, that nostalgia about what I grew up with also seeing this figure, James Caan, who normally plays a mobster, who normally plays a killer or a detective, a hard-boiled detective. Instead, you've got this softer side of him as a dad, and a dad is reuniting with his son. It just made Will Ferrell's performance so much more dynamic and gave this movie so much more space to explore.
Yeah, and don't forget Ed Asner, possibly the best Santa. Another good old guy.
Oh gosh, I was like, that's Artie Lang. You mean real Santa?
Yeah, the real Santa.
Yeah. Oh, that was
which I thought for the first half of the movie was Bob Hoskins.
Oh, could be.
That's weird. Yeah, that could have been. Yeah. But no, you're right. I mean, Ed Asner, he brings like this like very down to earth feel. Like Santa usually is one of two things. He's either really cynical because he doesn't want to be like Tim Allen and the Santa Claus and has like that like hero's journey, or like he's so bubbly and happy and like just, you know, you're like very much like greeting card Santa. And I appreciated that Ed Asner like was like just a normal dude. This was his job, and you know he's too old for this shit kind of thing.
It's blue collar Santa.
Yeah, really
he just wants to get the job done. Yes. Right. He's not magical Santa. This is a fucking work.
And on the pod, we mentioned this loss of Christmas spirit and how this is a movie that is taking, you know, direct aim at that. We talk about the clausometer on the sled and everything. As far back as Miracle on 34th Street, films have latched onto this idea of Americans losing their Christmas spirit, which is fascinating when you think about it, that from the get-go in movies, they were already talking about Christmas spirit being lost. And in Miracle on 34th Street, Santa, you know, they put him in a mental hospital, and there's this little girl that's taught not to believe in Christmas fantasies. In Elf, we get a little bit of a different take on that. You know, Santa's sleigh needs a jet engine because it no longer can fly on Christmas spirit alone. And by the way, Papa Elf built that in like the 60s. So it's been a while that's been needing this jet engine. And it's kind of weird to think about that because none of these movies is about the real Christmas spirit, right? It's not like we no longer believe in Jesus Christ was born in a manger and visited by three wise men in December. It's not talking about that. You don't see Jesus pop up in these movies. They're simultaneously in the film saying that Christmas is hyper commercialized and artificial. And then they're asking us to believe in the idea of Christmas that was created by like department stores and beverage brands, right? The Christmas idea that we have is it's Woolworths, right? It's Woolworths in the early 20th century, or the Santa that we know in the red suit with the rosy cheeks and the beard and all that. That's Coca-Cola's version of Santa Claus. I was fascinated to find, guys, there was a Pew study, I think it was like 2018 or so, where 57% of Americans said Christmas is less religious than it was in the past, which I totally agree. But most of America doesn't have a problem with that. Only about 32% of people are bothered that it's less religious. And that's the Christmas that I hold on to. Like, I'm not a Christian, but I love Christmas.
Right. I think there's like this irony that happens even in super religious families. I mean, like Big D, you said a second ago, like, you know, that I was raised in a religious household. Like I've made no qualms about that, for better or for worse. And I think that as religious as my parents were growing up, we never, not once when I was a kid, went to church on Christmas or Christmas Eve, like ever. Like Jesus, like the whole Jesus is the reason for the season, keep Christ in Christmas, like anti-Starbucks, like those whole movements, like my family and the people like that surrounded them in that church community, like that wasn't their thing. Like Easter was the religious holiday, and we would acknowledge it and, you know, maybe go see a living manger or something like that at some point during the season. But Christmas was always Christmas, like this idea of, you know, a Santa and believing in the magic of the season, not the magic of Jesus.
Totally. Easter, I'm celebrating the bunny, not Jesus. Christmas, I'm celebrating. So Vanessa, I've watched the transition. She's Seventh Day. Her and I, for the first 15 years of our marriage, did not celebrate Christmas. To me, whatever. I'm not big into it. Emma came along, and immediately I could see the cracks in Vanessa's facade. She said, well, you know, it's Christmas. Maybe you and Emma could do something. Oh, like get a tree? Yeah, if it's your idea, go get the tree. Now it's to the point where we're talking 8 years later. She's like, hey, do you think we can get the tree up in November? Hey, why don't we go do this over here? She's now become gung-ho Christmas because she finally separates the two. Whereas before, she almost felt like commercialized Santa with the family was challenging her religious beliefs. Now she embraces them as two wholly different events.
Yeah, I didn't grow up celebrating Christmas at all. And I really got into it because I started to realize that like this to me is actually the American holiday, right? Like we talk about the 4th of July and it's, it's about, patriotism and fuck yeah, Big D and launching, bottle rockets and shit. And that's all cool. But much like the Star Spangled Banner is like wholly focused on battle. Like Christmas is like the part of America that I love, which is like everybody decorating your houses and being nice to each other and like getting each other gifts and like really like that warmth where it's hard to be a shitty person around Christmas. And I really, really love that. I mean, last night I just got drunk and went for a dog walk around the neighborhood and just looked at all the Christmas lights and people's houses decorated. I'm like, these are adults. These are adults in my neighborhood who are taking the time to decorate their homes with, lights. And yeah, we saw a couple mangers and shit in people's yards too, but there's also like, a Santa Claus crashing into a rooftop and an elf going down a chimney and shit like that. And it's totally cool. It's totally what I wish every day was like in America. And this is my American holiday is Christmas. Well, Buddy finds the engine and reunites with Walter and Michael. Michael reads Santa's list in front of TV news cameras, proving that Santa Claus is real. A group of mounted Central Park Rangers chase Santa's sleigh as Buddy tries to reattach the engine, and Jovi leads the crowd in a song to raise enough Christmas spirit to power the sleigh. By the following Christmas, Buddy writes a best-selling book about his life, marries Jovi, and brings their newborn daughter, Susie, to visit Papa Elf.
So I know they wanted this to be a classic old-time holiday movie, but you can't just do that without having some luck come along the way. You can't perfectly put all of a situation, a plot, actors, everything together in a way that will work. It takes a lot of luck. And New Line Cinemas tried to fuck this movie up multiple times. They were a struggling studio who took a flyer on this small film with people who hadn't done anything before. Will Farrell, we think of him today, he's a big star. But at this point, he had done one movie as the main actor, Night at the Roxbury, and it was a flop. So for him to get this role as Buddy was a big step. Now during filming, right, he was doing Old School. Old School comes out. Now all of a sudden, he's this big hit. He is Frank the Tank. He is going streaking. It's a huge hit. New Line says, wow, we've got this star. So, Gene, think back. We did Teen Wolf. Teen Wolf was being filmed before Back to the Future came out. Back to the Future came out, and now all the taglines in the other countries were about like time travel and shit that made no sense for, fucking Teen Wolf. Here, the movie comes out. Now Frank the Tank, Will Farrell, is this big adult dirty comedy. He's a big comedian. So they were afraid that the fans were going to come out and be like, they want Elf to drop F-bombs, get naked, run around, be a fool. That wasn't what it was going to be. So what they did when the first test screens were being done, New Line said, we want a more Frank the Tank old school version. They cut out the entire heart of the film. The final scene with the caroling, with the spirit, with Santa struggling to fly off, that was all cut out and the movie tanked. It came down to at the end that Favreau and like the entire crew had structured the movie in a way that they couldn't change it. You couldn't pull out these scenes without fundamentally changing the movie. So New Line was forced to release the original version, and that's the version we know that became a truly modern classic. A few things going either way, and this movie is forgotten to the dustbins of all these other 90s fucking tropey, traditionally syrupy, failed comedic attempts at a holiday movie. All the things had to come through perfectly for this to work, and luckily it did.
Yeah, I love the feels that you get when the sleigh like finally takes off. It gets me every time, and it's such a formula, and I know that, but you've got the music with the swelling orchestra, and you just get this overwhelming Christmas spirit like they're producing, quote unquote, in the film to make the sleigh fly. And normally I don't like super cheesy endings, except for in Christmas movies. Like, I think they have such a place there. It's really the only place that I think that they belong. But one thing that maybe if they could have cut out in this test ending that I think could have made this a better film for me, if there's any negative other than Jovi's awkward karaoke is the Central Park Rangers. I don't think that they work. If we're going to be critical, which I guess is the point of a review podcast, I don't understand this idea that they're supposed to be just the random exaggerated bad guy. The logistics of this part of the film fall really flat for me. And I think the problem is I don't think they're needed. Like there's enough of an issue of Santa's sleigh being broken down that they could have just, dealt with that and the fact that he can't make it, fly because of the lack of spirit. That would have been enough. Why do you need these, random 6 guys coming out of nowhere? Why are they on the naughty list? Why is Santa having run-ins in Central Park at night in past times to make them come after him? How do they even know he's there? And y'all, how the fuck are they shutting Central Park down? Like, I have so many questions that could have just been left unanswered by not introducing them, like, ever in the first place.
Yeah, if I may, on behalf of the King Bee, I can answer all these questions in one sentence, which is all cops are bastards. The Rangers are after Santa because Santa is the opposite of police. Like when he shows up at your house, he's bringing you gifts and he actually knows who the good guy is and who the bad guy is. And he does all of his work without a fragile ego. He doesn't need you to have a thin Santa line sticker on your car. He never asks for recognition. He's never killed anybody, unless we're talking about Violent Night. Santa's kill count, I think, is 0, I hope. And therefore, I think that the Central Park Rangers hate him because they're cops.
Well, let's not forget Krampus. Maybe Krampus is more of the authoritarian version of Santa. You either be a good kid, you're not going to get coal in your stocking, you're going to get, flayed and murdered in front of your entire family. But Ash, to answer your question, Santa's got a problem with the park rangers, and they are real. They're not this violent like this. They're not militant, but it's because of what they did in the Simon and Garfunkel concert. We don't know what that is. We can imagine it must have been horrific.
Involved turtlenecks for sure.
Yeah, Santa must be a big, S&G fan. Maybe he was out there in 81.
All right, now is the time of the podcast where we give our Shat score for Elf. The Shat score is our way of telling you how many wipes this movie takes to get a perspective. But 0 wipes is a perfect movie. It's when you saw a dog today. And 5 wipes is an absolute disaster movie. It's when you ruin your family's lives and cram 11 cookies into the VCR. Big D, we'll start with you. What is your wipe score for Elf?
I'm going to cut to the chase. It is a 0.25 wipe movie. This is easily my favorite Christmas film. I watched this with Emma for the second time, as I mentioned, and her reactions validated it. There's a universal appeal to this film that you can't get from many. We laughed together. The embarrassing moments we got to share when she's in the shower and Will Farrell's in there. She goes, "Oh my goodness, that would be embarrassing." Her little smile meant a lot to me. My favorite Christmas movie by far, nearly perfect, 0.25 wipes.
Yeah, I think this movie's precious. It's a great Christmas film. My kids love it. And I think here's the thing. All great Christmas films, it needs to not age with time. And this one doesn't. It feels very timeless. Will Farrell is so incredibly charming. It's not my favorite. That will always be a tie between Home Alone and Edward Scissorhands, followed closely by The Ref, which someone should commission because that is a great Christmas film like that our podcast, I think, is long overdue of reviewing. But I do like this one so much. I do think there's some weird choices here and there. Jovi's, random lounge singing career that clearly is going to happen in part 2. And then also the Central Park Rangers at the end, just a few things that make it not perfect, but it's a movie that's really hard to critique because it makes you feel things in a way that even at times when they fail to portray that on the screen, the feeling's still there. So it's way, way, way above average for me. I'm going to come in just a little bit higher than you, Big D, at 0.5 wipes.
Ash, I was ready to join you in giving Elf half a wipe because it's so close to being perfect. But I started thinking about other Christmas movies of the same vintage. So things that came out, within a year or two of Elf and how they outdid this movie. I think Love Actually brought us an oddly painful and meaningful Christmas movie, which is fairly rare. It's not that syrupy sweet that we've known to expect from a Christmas film. And then there's Bad Santa. Bad Santa pushed the bounds of comedy. It took it to places that we hadn't really seen with a Christmas movie. Not to mention, this movie's got Michael Hobbs as the kid sidekick. Thurman Merman. Thurman Merman is probably the greatest Christmas sidekick of all time. So I'm going to say it's just a little bit below your score and go in with 0.75 wipes. And between my 3/4 of a wipe, Big D's quarter wipe, and Ash's half a wipe, that gives us an average score that matches Ash's, which is half a wipe for Elf.
So you might be saying to yourself out there, half a wipe? Man, that's got to be in the top 10. No, this gets it into the top 20. That's how many good films we have. This now ties it in the 20 spot with Aliens, Edward Scissorhands, Ash, Princess Bride, The Shining, Forrest Gump, and Internal Affairs. There's Internal Affairs again.
Fucking Richard Gere, man.
It's always there.
It was a great movie.
Yeah, it really was.
But, this feels right, being right there. I mean, because this is a great movie. It feels like Edward Scissorhands and It. Like, that makes total sense that the two of them, they make me feel the same things. They're both nostalgic in these really weird, different ways, but kind of also the same. The system works.
I agree. And thank you, everyone, for spending your Christmas with us. We hope you enjoyed our Christmas special this year. Big D, what do we have coming up next week?
Gene, next week we have the science fiction follow-up to the 1984 classic. It follows David, who, due to a time-traveling military experiment gone wrong, ends up in a future where the Nazis have won World War II and controls the United States. David tries to change history by thwarting the Nazis. This came out in 1993, directed by Stephen Cornwell, and it was commissioned by Mark T. Again, the month of Mark. Thank you very much.
I'm glad we're closing out 2023 on the strongest note possible.
Oh, like a wet fart.
Thanks, Mark. Well, that concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat the Movies. Email us, host@shatpod.com. Support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, buying our merch, or commissioning your own movie. Find all that information by visiting our website, shatpod.com. Also, check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV. Review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, True Detective, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and Watchmen. Find all information on our website, shatpod.com/TV. And if you're looking forward to True Detective, we're not covering it, but a new season is coming in January, so be sure to keep an eye out for that. Wherever fine podcasts to be found, including Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star review. It helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Ash and Big D, I'm Gene Lyons. Join us next week for the following movie.
Bottom of the ninth. Base is loaded. The pitch. Oh, and he's out of there.
Lucky catch.
They were inseparable.
I know it's been tough. I know you miss your mom. I miss her too. But you and me together, we're a team, right?
Until a top-secret military experiment.
Imagine being able to move an object from point A to point B quickly, silently, safe.
Came between them.
I give you super stealth. They're much further along than I thought.
I'm getting the hell out of here, away from you and whatever it is you're doing.
Generators online. Now. 10, 9,
Now.
8.
What's going on?
David's taking a trip.
This project has progressed to the brink of disaster. 7, 6, 5. These experiments are tearing him apart.
He never imagined.
2, 1, engage!
Catapulted into another 1993.
What's the date?
May 3rd.
What year, damn it?
What are you, stupid? 1993.
Peacekeeper Aircraft picked up an unauthorized presence.
Find him. All right, everybody out of the bus. Now. This is a security ID check.
Where an accident of history has turned America.
VA Day.
Victory over America. 50 years since the Phoenix bombed Washington. Where have you been all your life?
Into a dark world of fear and oppression.
Nightmare here because here was not meant to be. It never should have happened.
Find him, Decker. Keep him alive and bring him here.
Now David must risk everything.
I gotta get back to my son!
And find the one way back home.
Terminate him.
Go!
The Philadelphia Experiment 2.
Have you guys ever seen Davy and Goliath?
Davy and Goliath?
Yes, I think it's like it was the same Rankin Bass style, but it was a Christian values cartoon.
Jesus, no.
It used to be on in the morning before cartoons on a Saturday. So Davy was a little boy in a family of, I think we may see the father and the mother, and his dog is Goliath. So every show would be like, hey, we should go throw snowballs at cars. And then Davy would be like, that's not a good idea, Goliath. Jesus would be mad at us. That's wrong to do.
Wait, they were teamed up?
Yes, it was Davy. Davy was the boy and Goliath was his dog.
Okay.
They were teaming up. And every time in a show, there would be some moral question. Like kids would be throwing snowballs at somebody, and then Goliath would be like, oh, Jesus doesn't like when we pick on people. And in the end, it was some big moral Christian lesson, but it was in the Rankin Bass style.
Yeah,
I got to find a clip. Like
awful.
Robot Chicken has parodied it. It's when you see it, you'll be like, oh shit, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, no. No.
Ash,
I thought you were going to like that. Why would they be teamed up?
It was a dog and his owner. Ash, growing up in a religious home, Davy and Goliath, the stop motion cartoon that was, the dog was Goliath and Davy was the owner, and each one was them facing a moral issue. And at the end, Goliath usually would talk about Jesus. Jesus sacrificed for us. He gave his only born son.
No, that sounds terrifying. I've never heard of that before. I mean, I was forced to watch like Veggie Tales.
Yeah, I just like that they're like, hey, how do we represent a Philistine giant? I know, we'll make him a dog sidekick. That doesn't track. It doesn't make sense.
No.
A floppy or dog.
Makes no sense.